Hello everyone, and thank you for joining FlowForma's virtual workshop today, where you'll see a construction process digitized in just under an hour. So as your host today, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Ursula Cullen. I'm the Digital Marketing Executive here at FlowForma, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Paul Stone, Product Strategist today. Here at FlowForma, construction is our primary sector, as we found the construction industry to be very heavily reliant on paper. And it's with this that we wanted to give our construction audience an insight into how easy it can be to use the FlowForma process automation tool. It allows you to digitize processes quickly, gain rapid adoption, and get an early return on investment. Paul, why don't we start with you? Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Hi Ursula, yep, I'm Paul Stone and I'm Product Strategist for FlowForma. I've been working with FlowForma since its inception, and today I focus on the construction sector where we deliver FlowForma processes into construction clients. So today I'm going to walk you through a build of one of those processes using FlowForma.
The results are in. We asked you all when you're registering what process you would like to see digitized. And from the graph here, we can see that we had a really clear winner. So the field change requests, 50% of registrations asked for this process to be automated today. Paul, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's very interesting, Ursula. The field change request is as a workflow. It's quite data light, but there's certainly some workflow involved in that. As opposed to something like hotworks permit, and permits tend to be very data heavy, but not a lot of workflow involved. So it's quite interesting that result, the field change request is very much top of the list. And yeah, it should be no problem building that in an hour today.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll pass on to you then. And if you could then kickstart, that would be great.
Sure. So the first thing you need to do with any workflow is define what the workflow is going to be. Now, what does this mean? Well, right now, you probably have a process in place for field change request in your organization. That process will be documented. It'll be documented either on a piece of paper, as in a typed document, or it might be documented in a flow chart. It differs from one organization to the next, but you probably have a process defined already for a field change request. It is, after all, a very common process within construction. And what you typically do is when you're defining that process is you build out something like a flowchart like this, where you'd have I'm using Microsoft Visio here, where I'm building out a process where each box represents a task and a process and so on. And then you have swim lanes in a process for different actors. This is something that's very standard in the industry if you're talking about process modeling. However, I know lots of companies just have the processes documented in a Word document, for example, and that's absolutely fine. The only thing that's important with FlowForma is that you have that process understood. So you have some understanding of the process before you begin to digitize it. It sounds really straightforward and it sounds really obvious, but it is very much the case that you need to have that definition before you jump in and digitize a process. Once you have that definition, whether it's good or whether it's bad, you can actually start digitizing. And through the process of digitization, you can get a better understanding of the process and identify any issues that you might come across when you're digitizing that process. So in other words, you don't have to start with a completely perfect definition of a process. Don't worry about that. But you have to start with some definition, some understanding. Okay. So with a field change request, I could build this in Visio for you here, but I'm not going to. The workshop today is not about Visio. So what I've done is I've already put something into Visio here, and this is the process that I've mapped out, and I'll refer back to as we go through the build. So to kick off with a field change request, you have to raise the field change request. You then would classify it as a major or minor request. And then we'll typically go for some approvals, like a client approval and maybe approval by a site engineer. And then depending on whether it's a major or minor request, different people get to answer. So sometimes if it's a minor request, the site engineering manager would be the person to answer the FCR. But if it's a larger scope, then it will go to maybe the project engineering lead. Now the actual tasks in this will vary from one construction company to the next. So not all FCRs are identical. And this is so important because you need a tool that's flexible enough to handle the variations from one company to the next, from one project to the next, so that the resources might be very different, the resource makeup might be different, the steps might be a little different, but you'll have a system in FlowForma that allows you to vary that. Even as you move from one project to another project, you can just alter it slightly to cater for the resource makeup on the other project. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to kick off with this, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to change so that you can adapt it to your own organization. So once you've mapped out your process, as I say, it can be a Word document, it can even be a paper form that you start with, doesn't really matter. You can then start to build out the process. And to do that, we're going to go onto a FlowForma site. So FlowForma is a system that is, its purpose is to digitize processes. Those processes are often running on paper-based forms in your organization, being managed on spreadsheets or through email chains. And FlowForma lets you get a grip on all of that, manage it centrally, and capture all the information centrally as well, so that you can report on it. But the first thing you need to do is define that digital process. So we're going to build the field change request today, and I'm going to start from scratch, and we'll see how far we can get with it. So I have a FlowForma installed here in my own SharePoint environment, and FlowForma runs on top of SharePoint, and it stores all the data and documentation associated with the workflow in a SharePoint site. And we can give you more details about that. If you want to contact us after the call, we can go through the kind of technical prerequisites of FlowForma and so on. For right now, I'm going to concentrate on that build. So I have to give my new process a title. I'm going to call it field change request. And what we'll do is I'm going to give a little thing called a form prefix. What this is every field change request that the system generates is going to have a unique number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. And what we're going to do here is we're going to put in a little prefix that lets me quickly identify that this particular process is a field change request. Because you know what? I might have lots of different processes running in FlowForma for all sorts of things like permits and so on. I want to be able to quickly identify those FCRs. When I press save, it opens up a tool that we call the Flow Designer. Now, a flow in FlowForma is a template, a process template that you design as an administrator, and then the people in the organization execute their processes following the template. Time and time again, they're following the same template. They're executing the process in the same manner. So you're enforcing some structure on the organization that you're getting people to run standard processes time and time again. And then you can measure the performance as time moves on and more processes are executed. To start off with, you build a template for the process, and here's a template for the field change request. Now it looks pretty empty because we haven't created any steps in the process. Now what are steps? Steps are basically tasks that people carry out, that resources carry out. So the first step in this process, if you look back at our diagram, was to raise an FCR. Okay, let's go and do that. We'll create a step to raise an FCR. So I click on this button over here called plus step, and I'm going to give it a title, and I'm going to type it in right. So you're going to have to forgive my typing during this demonstration because typing under pressure can be a little bit difficult, but I'll try and keep the typos to a minimum, okay? Then what I'm going to do now is create all the other steps in the process. Because I usually start off by getting the workflow right first, by getting those steps in place. So let's go back here again and have a look at the other steps. Well, there's clearly one to classify an FCR, and then there is a series of approvals. Okay, there's a couple of approvals there. And then if they're approved, it goes on to, okay, well, it makes a decision. Is it major or minor? I guess that's the classification. It's a classification, major or minor. If it's minor, it goes to a thing called answer the FCR, which is carried out by the site engineer. If it's major, it goes to, well, answer the FCR. That looks like the same step, but it's carried out by different people depending on whether it's minor or major. And there's a little bit at the end then If it's a major one, it gets validated by the client, I believe. That should be the client there. Okay, so it gets validated by the client. Okay, so what that means is I've got a step to classify. I've got a couple of approval steps. And then I think I've got the answer the FCR. I think that's one step. And then it gets validated, but only if it's a major one. Okay, grand. Let's go back now to the thing and let's map that out. So I've got a step for classify. Then
And
I
Paul,
have a
there
step.
on the could I just ask on the classification
Yeah,
step, could you add in like an explanation so if someone goes in, they know what that means?
absolutely. In fact, for every step here, we're going to add in data because at the end of the day, you need to record the data that's that's being recorded at every step. So like in other words, when you raise an FCR, you're going to have to record a design document. When you classify the FCR, you're going to have to record that classification. And with the approvals, you'll have to record the approvals too. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create the steps first, and then I'm going to go in and create the data. And for sure, with classify the FCR, we can record an explanation in there as well.
Brilliant.
Okay. So what we'll do now is we'll do a site engineer approval. And then we'll do there's another approval, a client approval, I think. Okay. And then there is answer the FCR. So I think that's one step. And then the very last one then is validate the FCR. Okay, so there's the steps in the process. Now, one of the things that I noticed from the flow chart is that these two steps here, they happen basically at the same time. So the approvals can be done in either order and they happen at the same time. Excuse me. So what I would do there is I'd create a thing called a parallel group. And what a parallel group is simply two steps that can happen at the same time in any order. So let's go and do that. We'll go back to our workflow and I'm going to add in a parallel group. I'm going to call it approvals. And then we're going to drag this up here and we're going to include those two steps in the approvals group. Okay, so now we have two steps that are going to happen together. Also, validate FCR. That doesn't happen every time. It only happens if the classification is major. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that. So you see the little I with a cross in it, I'm going to make that invisible so that that does not normally happen. It only gets shown if it's a major FCR. So now we have our steps in place. And what I'm going to do is save this. And I'm going to look at what I've got so far. The way FlowForma works is you define a draft and then you refine the draft and gradually get it right. Okay, so you don't have to start off with something that's perfect. In fact, what I do is I build out my process and I keep going back and having a look at it to check to see are the edits that I'm putting in correct. So I'm going to close that out there and I'm going to choose from all processes and I'm going to pick my field change request just to see what it looks like so far. Okay, so at the moment in FlowForma I've got basically a few steps here: raise FCR, classify, a couple of parallel steps. You see they're slightly smaller, and then answer the FCR. And of course, my validate is invisible. Okay, well, that's a good start. At least I've got my steps in place, and I could submit these steps, and I could move on through the workflow and so on. That's all very nice, but I need more than just the steps. I need the data. I need the document management. I need a lot more than that to make out a solution. So let's close that. And let's go back in again and start building out the data. Okay, so now I need to think about what data am I going to capture in each step. If we look at Raise FCR, the first thing I probably want to capture is a summary. So let's get a summary of FCR, something like that. And I want it to be probably a paragraph or maybe several paragraphs. So in this case, I'm looking at the question type, and the question type actually is to do with the answer. What kind of answer do I want to this question? So I'm asking the question, what's the summary of the FCR? What answer do I want? Well, I don't want it to be a single line of text. That's too short. So I want to allow it to be multiple lines of text, a block of text, so people can type in a paragraph or maybe two. And the other thing is I want to make that mandatory. So it is required, and that means that they can't complete this task until they've entered in a summary. The next thing I want to do is give them some help. So please provide a summary of the FCR content and purpose. Okay. And then down here, I got some few parameters here that I can enter to make it look different. But you know what? It's basically fine. So I just want to capture a block of text that summarizes the FCR, and I want to make it mandatory so people have to enter that detail. The next thing I want to record is a document. So the FCR is going to be specified in a design document. So I want to capture that design document. So please, I always ask a question, please upload your design document. And in this case, it's actually a document file that they need to provide. So I'm going to have, the answer I'm expecting is actually a file. And if I look down here, you'll see that there's a question type called file upload. And what will happen there is it will actually allow you, it'll show you an upload button, and you can click on the upload button and upload your design document. So that's what I want to see. I want to see a file uploaded. That document, by the way, will be uploaded to SharePoint and will be stored in SharePoint and will be analyzed later on in the workflow.
And Paul, if someone needed to upload multiple documents, is that possible then? Could they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can upload multiple documents. There's a few different ways of doing that, and it takes a little bit longer to configure. So I'm gonna I'm gonna keep it to single one for now. But absolutely, we can come back to that and talk about that a bit more later. But for sure, you can upload multiple documents at the same time if you want to.
Brilliant.
Okay, so the other thing is that it's always very useful to provide people with instructions as to what to do. So I'm going to add some instructions into this workflow. So let's go into plus question, and I'm going to add in a thing called, I'm going to call this instructions. And these are some instructions that will appear on the screen that tell people what to do. And that's so important, especially when it comes to adoption. You want people to adopt this system, this solution. You need to help them every step of the way. So make it as easy as possible to do. So description, please provide a summary, upload your document, and press submit to get approval. Okay. So just correct the typo, and there we go. So what this is some instructions. Now, you see that I've added it in there at the bottom of that list. Well, if I want the instructions to appear on the top of the page or top of the form, I just drag that up to the top there. And you can drag the questions around to make them appear in different orders. But the form then will be rendered automatically. So you don't need to think about how the form is rendered. It's kind of rendered automatically for your browser, any browser. And it also works on mobile devices as well. I'm going to show you that a little later on. So it provides a very quick and easy way of defining the steps and the data, and then it just automatically renders it for you. And what it means is that if you want a solution for an FCR, you can get it together quickly. But if you want a solution for 10 other forms you have, you can also get those together very quickly and get them out in front of people very quickly, and they can review them, give you feedback, make any changes they needed, and then adopt them and get using them in the workplace. So the whole idea here is speed, so we get these these forms created very quickly. Okay, the next one, we're going to move on to the next step now. So classify the FCR, and the big thing I need here is I need a classification. So so let's put in a new question. Please select classification. And this time I want to make it a choice answer. So I want to give them two choices, major and minor. I'm going to make it mandatory again, and I'm going to enter the choice values. You notice that as I change the different question types, the form changes. So basically, it helps you along the way. You're always filling in a form. You're never needing to write any code with this system, and it becomes fairly quick and easy once you've got used to it. The training cycle on this system is a 2-day training cycle or less, depending on what you want to do. So it's pretty straightforward. I want this to appear as radio buttons. It means that I've only got two choices. I want them both to appear on the screen, and they can pick one or the other of them. I'm making it mandatory again, and that's it. I've got a typo or two in there, but oh well. If I correct all the typos, we'll never get through this. So here we go, save. Okay, now I could add in some instructions there as well, but you know what? I might just come back to that and add them in a little bit later. Let's go into the approvals section here. So I've got two approvals, and I want to add in a question here for the site engineer. Do you approve, yes or no? FCR. And then you know what, I want them yes or no. So yes or no, I've got a choice, a question type for that. I'm going to make it mandatory. They've got to select one or the other. I could put in some help text, but I can always come back to that later on, edit it. And then I'm going to add in a reason. So what's the reason for? Well, basically, if they say no, I want to force them to say why. So they have to say why they don't approve. And so I'm going to put in a reason. I'm going to put in that as multiple lines of text, give them plenty of space to type in whatever reason they like. I'm going to save that. But the reason is actually a reason for rejection, and I don't want it to appear all the time. So I'm going to hide it. So it means that doesn't appear on the screen, but I'm going to put in a thing called a business rule that's going to make it appear magically if they say no. So if they say, do you approve this FCR? If they say no, then I'm going to pop the reason up. It's mandatory, they've got to provide a reason, okay? So I'm going to add that in. So I'm going to add in a thing called a business rule, hide or show a question. In this case, it's hide or show the reason. And I'm going to put in a condition. So if the if the site engineer approval equals no, so if they say no, they don't approve, then I want to show the reason. It makes it just magically appear on the screen. And there you go. So that's a basic approval step. So do you approve? They've got to answer yes or no. If they say no, it's going to provide a reason. The other thing I'm going to do is if they say no, I'm going to automatically make the workflow jump back to the very first step. So if it gets rejected, it automatically goes back to the start. So I'm going to add in another business rule called a passback rule. And what it does is say if it's equal to no, then we're going to jump back to the start again. Oops, sorry. Okay, jump back to raise FCR, the very first step. Okay, so what we're going to do now is the second approval step here. That's actually pretty much the same as the first one. This time it's the client doing the job, but you also want to record the client doing it separately. You really want to use the same questions and rules again. So what we can do is just add in some existing questions. So I had do you approve? So let's go and add an existing question. I don't need to define it again. I can just look up my bank of questions here. And it should be one of the last ones. Oop, I didn't type it right. So do you approve this FCR, this last one here? And then I want to add in the reason. Now I've got a few workflows in the system, so I probably have a few reasons. Yeah, that's the last one there. Great, and then I've got to make that invisible, and then if no, show it. Oops, sorry. Hide show question, there you go. So what we're doing here is we're just duplicating this a little bit, because basically the logic is the same for both approvals, really. So we're going to show that reason there.
Is there a limit to how many approvals you can have, Paul, or is it infinite?
No, you can add in as many approval steps as you like. Like I do have a client in construction in Australia that has 30 approval steps in the parallel group. So yeah, there's no limit. And also you can hide and show these steps as well. So depending on, like if you have a variable number of approvers, you can vary the number of steps in the parallel group, right? Depending on so for each time you actually execute the process, you can change the number of people involved, and you can also assign the steps to different people as well, different resources. So for every single run of the workflow, you can use different resources. And you can also use different steps as well. In fact, I'll show you that the validate FCR works in a very similar way to the hide and show reason and so on, because the validate FCR is hidden, but you do actually want to show that if the classification is major. So I'm going to add in a business rule that I forgot to do that. Add in a business rule here to hide or show a step. And what I'm going to say here is hide or show validate FCR. And then the check I want to make here is if the classification is equal to major. So if it's equal to major, I want the client to actually validate it. And I do that by, you see here now I have a list of steps, pick validate FCR and show. Okay, so that's a way of hiding and showing steps. So you can do that with approvals. If you have like 10 approval steps, you can decide to show only 5 of those under certain circumstances. And it's very, very flexible in terms of the way you can handle the approvals.
Yeah, and I can see how the Visio would really help having your process built out, mapped out before you even start. So you're not forgetting any steps, you're keeping on track the entire time.
That's it. You can always refer back to it and see those decision points and then take actions based on the decision points. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
So in here then, the next step is answer the FCR. Probably more data than anything else on this one. And the first thing I guess is that when it comes to answering the FCR, you want to see the actual document in front of you. So let's just do that. Let's put in, let's put in a question in here called design document. There we go. And type that right again. And we're going to make that a file upload. And that's fine. That's all we need to do actually. We'll add that in. Now you might say, well, hang on a second, Paul, you added in the design document already. And indeed we did. So we have the design document question. Please upload your design document here. But what we're going to do, just to make it easier, because when you're answering the FCR, you may modify that design document. You are going to maybe supply some clarifications and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide all the information that you need right on the same page. So when you get to answer FCR, you see the design document link, and then you're going to see a box for clarifications and so on. So we put the design document again in this step. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy the design document from here to here. So let me show you how you do that. Let's jump back over to Raise FCR. I'm going to add a business rule again. And this time I've got a rule called set question value. Now we have lots and lots of rules, by the way, guys, to kind of cover off so many different scenarios. I'm only showing you a few of them because it would take way too long to go through the full list. But what we're doing here is we're basically copying something from one place to another in the workflow. And I'm going to take the design document from the Raise FCR there, and I'm going to copy it across to the design document field when it gets to answer FCR, so that the person doing the answering has everything in front of them straight away. So this is to copy design doc. Okay. Now, so the answer FCR, they're going to see the design document. That's great, but we also need a box for clarifications. So let's put that in. And that's going to be a big text box. So 100, make it nice and big, save. Now, you notice that I'm not making things mandatory anymore. I've stopped doing that, but that's what you should do. Obviously, you should make it mandatory. You should perform validations and so on, but I'm just rushing through it at this point because I want to get to a place where I can look at this as a whole, see that process, see if I think it's going to work, and start to think about the modifications that I might need to make. So I'm going to put in a field for clarifications. And then it's very important to, I feel, to say, have you completed your edits? So before you leave this step, you want to be able to, you want to ask them to say, have you completed your edits? And you want them to say yes before they're allowed to submit this. Right, so the person has to actually press a button and say, yes, I've done this. Mandatory again. And then let me think. Oh, you might want to record who actually did answer the deal. Sorry, answer the FCR. So what I'm going to do is add a question in, and it's going to be signed off by, or answered by, sorry, answered by would be the right thing. And then type my name in A and S W S. Sorry about this. There we go. And what we're going to say is that this is going to be a thing called a person or group. Now, what's that? Basically, it's the user. This system knows who you are all the time. So it knows who's logged in, who's using the system right now. And because of that, it's able to determine, are you the right person to be doing this particular step in the process, right? So you can identify who's doing what all the time, and it keeps an audit trail of who did what. So you actually have all the people who carried out the tasks, when they started, when they finished, and so on, is all being captured in the background. Now, because it knows who you are, you can set this to be the current user. So it automatically defaults to the user that you're logged in as. In my case, Paul Stone will just appear in the box. So I'm going to save that. And now with that one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that non-editable. What that means is it defaults to me and I can't change it. So it automatically shows up here as Paul Stone and I can't change that at all. And it's a visible audit trail. It's showing it there and then, this FCR. So when I say, have you completed your edits? Yes, it's saying, okay, well, Paul Stone actually ticked that box. Now, all of that detail is recorded in the audit trail in the back, but what this does is it puts it up front so that clearly on the screen for anybody to see, Paul Stone actually carried out this piece of work, yeah? Okay, now what I'm going to do there is I'm going to put in one thing called a validation rule, and the validation rule says that the person must answer yes to this question. Okay, so basically if they don't answer yes to the question, then it won't let you progress. So I'm going to add in a thing called a business rule again, and put in a data validation rule here, and it says this must be equal to yes. So edit conditions, answer FCR, have you completed, must be yes. And if it's not yes, then I want to display an error message on the screen. You must complete your edits. Something like that, okay? So in this way, you can actually put in validations that actually ensure the data being entered is correct. So of course, if you had a paper-based system, you would not be able to do this. You can't check information at the point of entry. And that's so critical in ensuring the smooth running of processes, that actually you check and validate information as the workflow is being progressed, right? So in other words, you don't have to loop around so much and rework things. So we can put in this simple check there, but you can build in very complex data validations if you want to. Okay, so let's just, I'll put in something into validate as well. Let's put in, let's say a confirmation. Okay, so something like this. We'll call it confirmation, and maybe I'm going to make this a choice, and I'm going to make it a thing called a checkbox. So you get a little tick box on the screen, and I confirm that this FCR is good to go. Now that is not very. Oh, let's put in something better. That is complete. There we go. Okay, and we'll make this mandatory as well. So in other words, the person has to tick that box to be able to complete the step. And we'll save that. Great. Okay, well, that's pretty good. Now let's save that and see what it looks like. And we'll go back and kick off that process now again. And in fact, what I'm going to do to make it easier to kick it off, I'm going to create a tile. So you can change these tiles that appear here very easily. So I'm going to create a tile straight away. Process tiles. And I'm going to create a new one. And I want a tile for FCR field change request. That's the one that I just did. With arrows, let me see. I don't have a better icon for it. Let's do a clipboard. Okay. And tile order, let's put it in as number 5 and save. Let's see what that looks like. Go back home again. There we go, field change request. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so we have our raise FCR, classify FCR, and down here we have this information. So I have to provide a summary of the FCR. That's what I need to do. Okay, test this out. And I need to upload a document. So I probably have a blank document I can upload here just for a example. That document is now uploaded onto SharePoint. I press submit, and it automatically moves on to the next step. I can see that I've got to select a classification. Now you notice I haven't put the instructions in here, but when I finish this process, I'm going to make this look better. I'm going to put in the instructions to make it more complete. But I'm going to, for the moment, just kick off on major. Submit that forward. You see my validate FCR step has suddenly appeared. Do I approve the FCR? Let's say I say yes here. But remember, there are 2 steps in this parallel group. So both of these guys have to say yes for it to progress. Now I'm going to say no. Oh, I've got to supply a reason. And if I were to press submit, it should just jump back now. Oh, I didn't put in the business rule to pass back on that step. So I've got to go in and fix that. I'll go in and fix that in a moment. So what happened was that it assumed approval was okay. So it went here, answer FCR. I've got a blank document to look at and edit and some clarifications to enter. Have I completed the edits? Yes. And my name there is stamped into the answer FCR. And I've got my validation error wrong. So it's telling me that you must complete your edits. So what I've actually done is I've put the logic in wrong, and now it's assuming that I have to answer no. So I think it'll allow me if I say no. Yeah, it will. So I need to go back in and fix that. So I've got 2 fixes to make, no problem at all. It gets to validate step number 6. I can confirm the step FCR is complete and I submit, and that's my process completed. Great. So I've got to make a few changes. Let me go in and do that very quickly. So field change request. And the first one was the answer FCR, having completed your edits, and what I pressed the wrong button there. What I did was I needed to change that validation. So let me just do that. Edit conditions. Yeah, I got it the wrong way around. Basically, if it equals no, I want to say you must complete your edits. Yeah, that's fine. Cool. And the next thing then is I had an approval problem because on this step, I had a passback rule. But on this step, I didn't have that passback rule. So I got to add it in. So add in passback. If the client approval is equal to no, oops, then I want to loop back. So go back to raise FCR.
Paul, can I just ask a quick question there?
Yeah.
So we have a question in, it's from Ben, and he asked, what are those fields at the bottom of each step? Attachments, comments, emails, CC.
Yep. So on each step, by default, we have a few things enabled. I'll just edit this to show you. It's a very good point. Well picked up. So by default, we allow people to add attachments to the bottom of the step and write in comments on the step, and also they can type in names of people who can be copied in on emails. So I haven't showed you the emails yet, but I am getting around to it. And you have the ability to send emails to a wide variety of email recipients. Now, if I want to control the way people are attaching things and control the way people are entering comments, like explanations, I can put in things like file upload questions and text boxes into the step. And then I have full control over what they're going to do, when they're going to enter data, why the data is being entered, and so on. And if that's the case, I normally uncheck these boxes so that those sections at the bottom of the form just don't appear. So if they're going to upload a design document, I don't want them attaching the design document to the bottom of the step. I want them to actually answer my question and upload a design document in that question there. And the great advantage of that is that I've got full control over it. I can actually use the system to control SharePoint permissions on that document if I do it this way. And I can copy the document around like I did there to the FCR step and so on. So I normally disable those, but they're quite handy if you're not worried about document control, for example, and you want people to have the ability to just add in attachments as they see fit. Then it's good to have those things enabled. But in this case, it makes sense to disable them. So I uncheck those boxes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, so I fixed those couple of errors. The other thing I'm going to do is those step numbers that appear on the very top of the form. I don't particularly like having those in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove them. So I can set lots of settings that control the way the form appears. So for example, I can hide the step numbers. So the step numbers it doesn't say step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That's often a distraction. It's quite handy to use when you're testing out your form, but when you want to put it live in production, people just don't need to see them basically. Okay, so I can also use things like enable the full screen width for the form, and there's lots of other options in here. But for the moment, I'm just going to leave it as is. I can also set, by the way, default durations. So I can say that, well, this workflow should take 3 days to complete, but I can change that to 2 days or whatever I want to. And these are kind of the estimated durations for everything. I can put those on steps as well, so that you can say that, well, the first step should take about half an hour, the second step should take 2 days, the next step should take 3 hours, whatever you want. And then that information is all available to report on as well. So you have estimated durations, and then you have actual durations as well. So I'm just going to press OK with that. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm just watching the clock, is I'm going to show you how you can alter the appearance of the form. So we saw the appearance earlier on. It was quite okay, but it was just that. It was just okay. It'd be nice to make it a little bit more colorful, for example. So we have a thing called the Forms Designer, which you click on that box and you can change the appearance of the form. And the obvious one to do is, for example, change the step color. So I might want to change the step color to, maybe a lighter brown or something, a kind of a gray or something like that. I might want to change the separator color to the same thing. So let's say if I open that up there, I can take that code So this is useful for applying branding and so on. And I can go here and apply that same code to the separator. So as you can see, they both appear in this kind of lighter gray. Now you can be much more creative than I'm going to be because you can do things like upload a logo and so on and change the general appearance of the form. And you can also do things like create collapsing sections within the form and so on. And you can also create a layout for mobile devices. So we'll talk about the mobile app in a minute, but when you create a form, it's automatically available on mobile devices as well as the desktop. So you create it in the desktop just like I've done here. In fact, I'm going to cancel out those changes. You can create the form on the desktop just like I did here. And then what you can do is use the form on a mobile device as well. So to show you that, what I'm going to do is jump over here, and I have a FCR that I created earlier in running on our mobile app. So this is a mobile phone emulator that you should be seeing right now. It emulates an Android phone as it happens, but we also have the exact same app running on Apple as well, Apple devices. And this is what the form looks like. Now this form was one I created earlier. So let me just go in here and let me see if my new field change request appears, assuming I have connectivity. Oh, let's press the refresh button. No, I haven't actually used it in a little while, and I've got a little problem there. So what we'll do is we'll close out of it. Sorry. Just kick it off again. Sorry about that. So what we'll do is I'm gonna launch a new form. So if I go create new form and download all. Oh, there we go. Sorry, it's just taking a little bit of time. A connectivity problem. I'm going to download all the forms onto my mobile device, and then I can create a new form on the mobile device. So we'll be able to create a new field change request. That's the one we created just earlier on. And this is the FCR that we've just been working on. So you can see my various steps in the process. The mobile device layout is automatically created. So without doing anything at all, you'll be able to use the form on a mobile device. And there's various enhancements just specifically for mobile screens that are automatically there. So for example, things like question labels are displayed on top of the answer, and because obviously mobile devices tend to have a narrower form factor. So be catered for that. And also it gives you some additional features, like when you press the upload button, you can take a picture. So you can be on if this was a site process, you'd be able to take a photograph of, let's say, a building on the site, and you'd be able to annotate that photograph as well and save it on the mobile device, and then synchronizes automatically up onto SharePoint. So there's lots of mobile features, including a few that we built specifically for construction, such as that ability to annotate images, and also the ability to capture GPS location and render it in the map and so on. So there's some very mobile specific features. The mobile app itself is quite rich in terms of its features. Running it at a time, so I'm going to have to move on. So basically, when you create that field change request, you can then integrate it into your site. The field change request itself is, you can run it by just clicking on a link. That link can be inside a site like this, or it can be inside an email. So you can send out emails from the system and record the actual data and documents from the form inside the email. So you can attach, for example, the design document and email it to an engineer, and you can convert that document automatically to a PDF. So there's lots of things that you can do with business rules to, if you like, complete and enhance that field change request. And you can also carry out reports on the data that you capture as well. And just so you know, this particular form, it's more about workflow than about the data. So it's about workflow. It's also about document handling. A lot of forms in construction are not like that. You have forms in construction that are check sheets mainly, So any of the permits that you might be dealing with, for example, will be more check sheet focused. So just to explain that the system can also handle complex data as well, including tabular data and so on. But that's not necessary for a field change request. So just to let you know that that's a possibility. Okay, at this point in time, I think we have about 8 minutes left in the call, I think, and the webinar, sorry. I think, Ursula, do we have any questions at this point?
No, we haven't. We've no more questions here at the moment, but guys, now's your time. If you want to ask Paul a question, you can quickly pop it into the questions panel or in the chat function. And always, Paul and myself will be on hand after the webinar as well, and we'll be able to answer any questions you want post-webinar too. So one question that's come in here, Paul, can you quickly show how you assign people and roles? I don't know if you could quickly do that in a couple of minutes, but maybe you can give it a shot.
No, but it's a really good question. So I'm going to do it very quickly on that field change request, just to give you an idea. Now, you can, first of all, you can assign a step to a person or to a group. And it's well spotted because I just assigned everything to myself, which of course is totally unrealistic. In reality, many different people will be carrying out this field change request. So it's a really good call there. So what I'm going to do is to show you one way of doing it. First of all, if you look at the step definition itself, it has a default owner. So you can change that default owner if you want to. But most workflows require step assignments to be dynamic so that you actually alter the assignments as you move through the workflow. And the way you do that, there's a number of ways of doing it, but I'm going to add a question in here that says, who is going to classify this FCR? And then what I'll do is I'll make that a person or group. And then I'm going to use a business rule that actually assigns that step. So when I complete this step here, I'm going to assign classify to somebody else. And I use a business rule for that step assigned to. So what I'll do here is pick the step I want to assign. I can actually pick multiple steps if I want to. Classify FCO is the one I want. And then I'm going to assign that to a person or group defined in a question. And what's the question? It's who's going to classify this FCR. So whatever the person types in into that field, that's the person that's going to be assigned to do the classification, right? Now you can actually set the system up to really dynamically assign the steps so that you can, for example, you can look up a project and based on the project, you can find out who's in the role of project manager, for example, automatically pull that into a question here, which is maybe read-only question, and then use the value in that question to assign the classification to the project manager. So there's lots of ways that you can actually manage assignments. But I guess the key point is that every step is assigned to somebody, and the system has a way of dynamically assigning those steps as you move through the workflow. And then really it's up to your imagination as to how you want to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's a very, very good call there that I didn't cover off. Thanks for bringing that up.
Another great question, Paul, that's coming in is it possible to hide the process flows that show at the top of the step? So the ones that are only relevant to the people that need to see them.
Yeah, so the default way FlowForma works is it shows you all the steps in the process in that thing called, we call it a step bar at the top of the form. And the whole idea is that it's giving that end user a quick view as to, what's happened in the past and what's most likely to happen in the future, and also what's happening right now. So what step are you on right now? What job are you doing right now? Now, the thing is that you can actually make those steps appear and disappear in any way you want. So if you don't like the default way it works, you can actually hide all the other steps and only show the current step. Okay, so you can do that using business rules again, and you can do it whatever way you want to do it. But you don't have to have the default view. And also, just very quickly, because this would take quite some time to fully describe, but we have a thing called a security wizard, which governs who can access all the different steps and the flow itself. So who can create the form in the first place? You can limit that down to individual users if you want to, or groups, and you can give people access to read the contents of steps, or you can deny them access so they can't see the content. So we have this security layer inside the system that allows you at step level to say, okay, well, on client approval, only Paul Stone's allowed to see that step, for example. So yeah, it's got very granular ability to restrict access to steps and to workflows themselves, so that only the right people basically can carry out the work.
Yeah, yeah. And another great questions come in. Someone's asking, can we assign steps to people outside the organization? So, for example, external designers or subcontractors.
Yes, quite uniquely, FlowForma has this ability to, we call it FlowForma Engage, that allows you to engage with people outside of your organization. So you imagine you have Office 365 in your construction company, and you don't want anybody else having access to your Office 365 areas, and just security risk associated with that. So what you can do with FlowForma is you can actually assign a step to an external user. You can even have that as an anonymous user if you want to, and they can go in and complete the step as long as they have the right link to do that. Okay, so it's all tied into a URL that you might send them in an email, for example, and they'll have the ability to come in and complete a particular step in a particular workflow. You can also have secure access. So let's say they had a Gmail account. You can assign a step to a Gmail account and say, well, actually, only post on the gmail.com is able to complete this step. You can click on the link. The system will have you authenticate against Gmail. So it will force you to log into your Gmail account. It will capture that authentication, and then it will display that single step to you. It won't show you any other steps in the process, and it will allow you to enter in that detail, attach a document and so on, and submit it. And then it will come back into your Office 365 environment. That data will come back in and the audit trail will be captured and so on. But that Google user has no access at all to your Office 365 environment. So it's a great way of involving external users without actually having the hassle of managing all the security inside Office 365. Yeah, so that's the way you can do it. And a lot of people use it. The most common use case for it is supplier management, where you want suppliers to, for example, send you a quote, and you want to assign a step to a supplier, and they can fill in the details, press submit, and then it comes back in for some analysis, pricing analysis, and so on. And the other thing is, sorry to keep going on,
No
but
problem at all. Yeah.
just to say that the other thing that people use it for is dealing with external contractors, where the external contractors can actually have access and log a timesheet, let's say, without actually having access to your Office 365. So sorry for overrunning.
You can book a one-to-one demo through our website, just flowforma.com/demo. I'd also recommend that you register for your 14-day trial. Inside that trial, you'll have the field change request process sitting there ready for you to customize for your organization. And myself and Paul will be available for any questions and any of the other process experts in FlowForma as well. So I want to thank you all for joining today. You'll get a quick pop-up survey that's going to come up at the end, and we'd really appreciate if you could fill that out. It just helps us guide us on our upcoming webinars and different workshops. So thank you very much, Paul, for your help today, and we'll speak to you all
No
soon.
problem.